Conversations across time, 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 conversations across time.
Good evening and welcome once again to Conversations Across Time, the show that gives you, the viewer, an opportunity to have some illumination on historical personalities. Of course, seated to my left, as always, is my co-host who is always with us, and that is former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs.
My pleasure.
And our guests tonight are seated to my right, Fyodor Dostoevsky. And as you know, probably the most famous Russian author and considered the father of psychology. So welcome again.
Zdravствуйте.
And seated next to Mr. Dostoevsky is former Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. I was hesitating to give more of an introduction because I believe as this show unfolds, you will, and those of you that are regular watchers know Secretary John Foster Dulles. Welcome, Mr. Dulles.
Madam?
And I understand that your friends call you Foster. I wouldn't dare to ask. I wouldn't dare to say that without asking. But rather than giving your whole name during the course of this show, may I please refer to you as Foster?
No, you may not, madam, because I respect my dignity. I expect you shall do the same.
And somehow I knew that you would not disappoint me. Seated next to Foster is Sharif Hussein bin Ali. Welcome, Sharif. I describe for our audience's sake, in terms of giving a historical perspective on you, to say that you are the character that was so elegantly portrayed by Omar Sharif in the movie Lawrence of Arabia.
Still much better looking than he ever was.
Absolutely.
So when last we were together, we were getting to a conversation about your reaction to what is currently going on in the Middle East today. We were talking about betrayal and trust, and I think it's no secret that Babette and I had the feeling that the crisis that is occurring in the Middle East was set, the stage was set for that by things that happened with you and the way that the Brits, the British and the French lied to you and got you to unite and mount an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. And they did that because they wanted you to help. They wanted to help weaken Germany during the First World War. So that being said, that's just enough of a background to let the viewers who might not have seen our last show know exactly what we were talking about.
Well, they were colonizing powers. I have a joke for you.
Certainly.
About the European colonialism.
We would love to hear it.
You would like to hear my joke?
Yes.
How can you tell whether a European diplomat is lying to you? Your borders are moving.
Very good. Very good. Like that.
And that's
I'll be here all week.
That's, of course, what happened.
Exactly what happened. Now, right now there's there's something that I'd like to get your take on. The Saudi government caused the execution of a well-respected cleric. Now, for our audience's sake, I'll try to fill in the blanks to let you know that the Saudi government is run by members who are Sunni.
It's a family.
Yes, and they're Sunni.
Saud.
The Saud family. That's correct. And the Nimr al-Nimr, and I may be mispronouncing his name, was a well-respected Shia cleric who was voicing opposition to the way that Shia are being treated by the Saudi government.
Speaking freely is a dangerous business, not usually very profitable.
And well, now given that, how do you feel about because you being both Shia and Sunni, and that was one of the reasons that I think we've decided that a lot of the problems that are going in the Middle East had to do with you being betrayed by the French and the British. And how do you feel about the beheading of the cleric Nimr al-Nimr?
I'm against it.
Well, I understand that, but in view of world politics, do you have anything any insight that you could offer?
What do you think provoked it? What do you think the aftermath of it will be?
More fighting.
And what provoked it? Why did they do that? Why did the Saudis use this particular moment when, of course, the United States and Iran have a better understanding?
Moving towards better relations.
Yes. And suddenly...
Seems like you answered your own question.
Yes, I think that's what... I think that's true.
And I think that, and I'd like, because you are sitting next to Secretary Dulles, who is certainly, or bears a lot of responsibility for what's going on in the Middle East today.
And I bear it with pride, madam. I acted in the best interest of the United States government, your country, might I add.
No, you acted in the best interest of the clients of Sullivan and Cromwell, your clients who were multinational business corporations. That's who you acted in the best interest of.
Just about the same thing, madam. What
Oh.
benefits...
I'm glad you said that.
Excuse me, but I've always believed that what benefits the corporations of our country benefits the country itself.
Somebody else said
despite of what you socialists assume.
So you would agree with Disraeli, who said countries don't have permanent friends, they have permanent interests.
Just about true, madam. That is how the world does function in reality, and I am not persuaded by altruism or any idealism. I deal with the world exactly as it is. Power blocks, interests,
Wait a minute.
affairs, and
You
all.
deal with the world exactly as it is because
I
it's
do.
exactly as it is because you and your ilk created this.
How did we create something that's already been there for centuries, madam?
Well, wait, what's always been there? The chaos in the Middle East hasn't been there for centuries.
Yes, it has been, madam.
Mr. Secretary, part
Yes,
of the
sir.
chaos was caused directly by you. And I will state this unequivocally, that you and your policy, because your hatred for communism and your hatred for other people dictated your policy. In the name of morality, you did certain things that were not in the best interest of the country. And I'll give you one simple example.
Please do, sir.
When you withdrew the United States aid to Egypt and you slighted President Nasser by calling him a tin pan Hitler, you opened the door for my mother Russia to have tremendous influence in Egypt and arm Egypt, and then expand her interest in the Middle East to other countries such as Syria, and that's part of the problem we are facing right now. So how do you justify that when your own morality dictated what you did and your own hatred of Mr. Nasser dictated what you did as opposed to what would be in the best interest of the world and of the United States? How do you justify that, sir?
I don't have to.
What do you mean you don't have to?
I acted in what I perceived. How shall I put
You're
this?
tongue-tied because you can't answer the question, sir.
I'm not being tongue-tied.
You're becoming Foster.
Excuse me?
Question is, I think the question is why always a short-term goal? Why not look ahead and see, for instance, We made ourselves the most hated country on the globe.
I don't see
And
how we
does
have to
that
be
help
hated.
us?
The ugly American. I mean, that all comes from policies that you put in place. The neocons today are they're heirs to your legacy.
Really? How so?
They're heirs to your legacy because they operate from the principle that the United States should police the whole world, that the United States values should be something that the world should follow. I mean, you've misused power. Don't you see that? Look at the Middle East today. Look at Iran. Look at the bad relationship we now have with Iran, and now that it's
Because we've abandoned our ally, the Shah. You
Well,
don't
the Shah
abandon an ally.
The Shah that you put in place, your puppet.
Wait a second.
What puppet? I mean, he was a
Excuse me,
legitimate...
excuse
sir,
me, Mr.
excuse me, I am not to be interrupted. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Foster.
Yes.
You assassinated numerous world leaders. You and your brother, who was the head of the CIA, assassinated numerous world leaders in the name of forwarding democracy in those countries.
Some countries aren't capable of
But
democracy.
you create chaos in those countries, and in the long run, as Babette said, it's not in the interest of this country. Now, as your morality, and I agree with you about the atheistic communism and socialism, you hate them as much as I do. But your morality, on the other hand, you had no morality. In fact, I think you would have risked nuclear war and destruction of mankind to destroy communism. So how do you justify that?
If we have to do that, so be it.
No. That's not something
Wait,
that you
wait.
can say that lightly. If we have to do that, so be it. You mean if you have to end civilization as we know it, so be it? What does that mean?
That means recklessness, and one hopes.
I don't consider myself reckless, madam.
Of course
I
not.
have worked for decades in my capacity as Sullivan and Cromwell in working with heads of corporations and heads of states.
How about first of all, we did talk about this the last time we were together, that indeed Sullivan and Cromwell was very much involved with protecting German interests leading up to the Second World War and during the Second World War. Your clients were, it is said that what happened with the Nazi Party in terms of helping Hitler was the fact that there were these corporations, these American corporations who were clients of yours.
How they conduct their business, madam, is not my business. I have to protect their profits. I have to protect their property. That was my duty.
At the expense of the security and well-being of the
the
country
United
you're supposed to
Yes.
represent?
Yes.
They are simultaneous, sir. The interests of the corporations I represented and the United States become down to it simultaneous.
Let me just backtrack.
Somebody else said that. What's good for General Motors is good for the U.S.
If you have to be vulgar about it, madam, yes.
I want to go back to
I
Hussein
have to
bin
be
Ali.
vulgar.
I want to go back to Hussein bin Ali and the fact that you were present with your uncle, who was Secretary of State under Wilson, under President Wilson. So you were present at the negotiations for the Treaty of Versailles. We spoke when last we were together about the McMahon Agreement, which was an agreement that had been made by Britain and France that they would support the establishment of a caliphate if indeed Hussein bin Ali would help by orchestrating conflict within the Ottoman Empire, so that because the Ottoman Empire was aligned with Germany. And part of the land that you promised as a result of Theodor Herzl and his quest for Zionism, part of the land that was promised for the establishment of the caliphate is land that you negotiated away for the establishment of Israel. I'm just confused as to the duplicity that you seem to always be.
You have to understand that diplomacy is not very neat and tidy. I mean, Yes, I was involved in the negotiations of the Treaty of Versailles, and that
the
gave me
betrayal?
the, excuse me, madam, and that gives me the, had me what you might call a window seat to how foreign policy is truly conducted. It's not a town hall, madam.
But you, so that do you have,
Why not?
sitting here today, is there anything within your moral structure, if you have one, that would speak to the fact that you betrayed Hussein bin Ali? Within the Islamic faith are the Sunni and the Shia. Sunnis represent 85% of all people of the Islamic faith. They accept caliph status for any of the first four successors of the Prophet Muhammad. Shia followers only embrace and accept the bloodline of the fourth caliph as true heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. Accordingly, Muslims eligible to achieve caliph status must come from the bloodline of the fourth caliphate. Caliphate is a form of Islamic government. In order for there to be a caliphate, there has to be a caliph.
What your plan for the caliphate, you were going to bring together all of the Muslims, right? Under one country, which the British and the French promised you. Is that not correct? You're making such a face.
I mean, because you were both Sunni and Shia. And we know now that one of the major breaches that is happening in the Middle East has to do with the Sunni-Shia clash.
It shows how backward these people are, madam.
Mr. Forster, in his own mind, has a high degree of morality, but he's really not a moral person.
How do you dare say that, sir?
Here's how I'm going to say it, okay? Morality is doing the right thing regardless of the outcome. You would kill people in your mind to protect the United States, so you say, and you say that's all right. Now, from my perspective, how I look at morality, it's not all right. The ends do not justify the means. And the problem is, and you come from a religious background, I believe your father was a minister. The Western Christianity is bastardized. It goes against the teachings of Jesus. The only way for world peace is for us to go back to believe in Jesus, as I do in my Russian Orthodoxy and my Eastern Orthodoxy.
So how is my religious zealotry any worse than yours, sir?
Because the morality of Protestantism, which you're a WASP, I'm sure, I know you are a WASP, is capitalism is great.
Is the basis of our nation's prosperity.
Exploitation is okay. That the strong can take advantage of the weak.
Such is the nature of the world, sir.
And that is evil no matter what. If it satisfies the ends, then that's okay with you. And you can't, because you said you would risk nuclear war, the destruction of mankind, for your beliefs. That's totally immoral.
Well,
So you say,
now
sir.
that we've resolved that, are there any questions about anything topical? How can we actually apply any of this, or how can the world leaders that you're talking
Going forward?
about? I mean, this seems like what we're really getting is a tirade against Dulles' immorality, which is at this
Not
point
just
no
his
longer
immorality, all Western immorality. All Western exploitation, British exploitation.
How far west do you want to go?
I'll go from Mother Russia all the way through Europe to the Western Hemisphere.
Because I think one of the things that we strive to do, Mr. Ali, Sharif Ali, is we strive very much on this show to give bring some light to little-known facts of history. Because traditionally, the way that we have been taught, and I'm speaking for Babette and myself, that we've been taught is that one of the things we know that Foster was so rabid about has to do with the spread of communism. After the end of the Second World War, Foster and his brother Alan were two men who wielded a great deal of power because he was the Secretary of State, which meant that all of the policies of the United States, the public policies of the United States, were carved by him. And the only thing he had to do was to speak to the president about it, and the president that he was Secretary of State under, who he served under, was Dwight Eisenhower.
I served at the pleasure of the President of the United States.
Well, no, you manipulated for that. You manipulated
How
for
did
that.
I manipulate?
You manipulated for that job because there was someone else who was more qualified to be Secretary of State, because people were afraid that because of your background as an attorney and because of the clients that Sullivan and Cromwell represented, that it would be dangerous to the country.
Serious conflicts of interest, which is what happened.
The President approved of my doings.
No.
Therefore,
Let me finish because I want to set the stage here. So you were the person who was shaping policy for the United States. Your brother, as the head of the CIA, was actually arranging and managing coups against any world leader.
Against our country.
No. Any world leader who was in conflict with your client's interests. United Fruit.
Well, that's why we were in South America.
In South America.
To assume that
the duly elected prime minister in Iran, because Iran had entered a deal with British Petroleum, which essentially said all of the oil in Iran belongs to British Petroleum. I'm just saying you occupied a very, very dangerous position that today I would think you and your brother would at least be brought up on charges of...
Well, we weren't, so...
No, you weren't,
apparently,
because you controlled the press. You were very good friends with Henry Luce, who was the editor of Time. He put your brother on the cover of Time.
Before the internet, so people did not get the facts. But here you're sitting next to a gentleman who was promised something.
Gentlemen?
Who was promised something for risking his life and his people to participate in
Achieve
the
a
war.
barbarian tribe. Dozens of them in the Middle
and
East.
who was kicked to the curb, and look what's happening in the Middle East now.
What
Can
did
you
happen...
imagine if this man had been allowed to
Establish the
unite
caliphate.
the Sunnis and the Shiites in the Middle East in one caliphate?
The fact is that these Western demagogues are terrified of what would happen if any one group of people different from them were to actually unite. They fought it actively in Southeast Asia, in the entirety of Asia. It's the foundation for the principle of the Red Menace.
Yes.
Which was very real in Russia, Romania, East
No.
Germany. It was very real, madam.
It's the foundation for all of colonialism. This is
It's
is
got to
not
do
new
with
information.
Exploiting people in trade and making the colonial power richer.
It's the entire 20th century.
But it's the world resource. We always go, at least for me, I always find myself talking about oil. Because in 1905, when Winston Churchill realized that oil would be an important commodity, and as Secretary of the Admiralty in Great Britain, he changed the energy source used to power the British Navy from coal to oil. So oil became very central to what it is that happened in world politics. And I don't think that that's very well known. I think it's something that's been obscured. And so when you say that we are attacking Secretary Dulles, I guess I'm still searching for some seed of acknowledgement, at least.
Well, we certainly, people in the United States and Western Europe, live a charmed life compared to most of the rest of the people in the world. And part of that is because we have been able to exploit the rest of the people in the world, take their resources and use them as market for, they provide the raw material and then we sell it back to them. And in both transactions, it helps the United States and Western Europe.
Yes, and would you prefer that for the good of these poor, unfortunate nations, we revert to living in grass shacks? I don't think so.
But see, Secretary Dulles, that's the problem.
I think it's a false dichotomy.
Yes.
I believe it's very real dichotomy. You prefer that we live in mud huts as an act?
But we're not saying that. What we're asking is,
as we lived, say, in 1940 or 1930, right? Which was not a bad life, but we weren't sucking up the whole resources, the whole
natural
world
resources
the
of
way
the
we
whole
are
world,
now.
as though we have some sense of entitlement. And then, when the population of those nations that we've exploited, when they turn on us and want to create war upon the United States,
then we create war on them.
no, but
Right.
I keep
What does
asking
that
for
solve?
some semblance of responsibility for this, because I don't think that what is going on in the Middle East now was inevitable if you and your patrician class had not interfered with the policies and the politics within those nations and disposing leaders. For instance, President Truman,
A two-bit political hack, I might add.
but two-bit political hack, because he did not want the United States to be involved in changing the leadership of any other country. And I believe that President Woodrow Wilson, when you and your uncle were helping to craft the Treaty of Versailles, President Woodrow Wilson was the first person to speak up and say, well, what do the people in the Middle East want? Before
That's
you
not
started
my
dividing,
responsibility.
but before France and Great
why
Britain
not?
started dividing the Middle East and making these artificial borders, not even acknowledging the existence of the Kurdistans, the Kurds, for instance. You just created these boundaries. You don't see that as any.
Who are the Kurds? Really a Stone Age mountain people.
Excuse me, Mr. Forster.
Dulles.
Whatever. You make a fundamental mistake when you say things like monolithic communism. And it's the same mistake our leaders make today when they talk about monolithic Islam or monolithic this. Communism was different in many different countries, but you treated it and it was exactly the same way today. We look at some of our leaders, and I have to say this, I mean, he embarrasses me, but Premier Putin thought I was his favorite author, and he also likes Donald Trump. So, on one hand, he's very smart, and on the other hand, he's blind. But by the same token, the leaders today, especially some of the demagogues, like you were, treat things in a monolithic way rather than look at individual things. The Islamic beliefs in Iran are different than Saudi Arabia. They're not all the same people. They're not even the same ethnic group. And to look at them as one monolithic group, like you look at communism as one monolithic thing, is totally stupid, and it affected policy, and it led to negative things. And I want to ask you one question, okay? Were you, Emile Zola in the Dreyfus case pointed a finger at the French and said, "J'accuse," which means I accuse. And I accuse you of being indirectly responsible for the assassination of President Kennedy.
Conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations